reasons, right? But let's just define them again. What does be your own boss mean, right? You seek autonomy and control over your work and the decisions you make. You want to be the decision maker. You want to do what you want to do. Again, great reason. But what we're going to do today is understand what this requires of you. On the very far, depending on how your screen looks, that third column is just telling you some of the sources that cites this. Right? People pursue a passion. Starting a business allows an individual to work on something they love and care about. I don't think my father loved being a cab driver, right? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, I know so. But for those who can, it does allow you to do what you love and care about. And again, entrepreneurship changes where you are in life. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. Financial independence, right? A lot of people want to build legacies, want to create generational wealth. Uh, Business ownership can offer you that opportunity, right? Unlimited income potential, depending on the type of business you create. And then when we talk about identifying a market opportunity, which if you're taking notes, this is probably what's paramount to any of you, right? A lot of businesses start when you can solve a problem, when you see a gap in the market and the need you can fulfill in it, right? So this is a key part. And we're going to dive a little bit, probably in the middle of this presentation, we'll dive into that. And again, if anyone has questions, feel free to chime in, hop on. We can have some healthy conversation here. And then flexibility. People want flexibility in work hours and location, right? Especially post-pandemic. So I'm at a point now where I've decided. So I told you I have Black Dad Unfiltered, the digital marketing company. I have 4 to 6. I have DreamWorks Digital Studio, which is my software development and digital marketing agency. Um, and then 4 to 6 Media is more of another passion project that we have that really looks to help children, like second generation Haitians, learn Haitian Creole. But I started realizing, because I'm a little bit older now, that I really want to be able to work wherever I want to work. I don't want to have to, if you're a New York City person, right, chances are you're commuting 30, 40, 50 minutes one way, sometimes an hour just to get to work. I don't want to do that anymore. So even with my ventures, it's about, can I be in another country and still work? I was in the Dominican Republic last week and I was able to still work on my ventures. And then that creates the flexibility. So that talks a little bit about why people get in. But again, I told you a story about my father. You know, it's a give and take. Financial independence doesn't mean you're going to be wealthy right now. So, what are some of the common myths when it comes to entrepreneurship? You need a lot of money to start. Folks, you just need to be creative. Right? Many businesses start with a lean creativity, pre-sales, or freelancing. So I told you we have Black Dad Unfiltered, and I'm going to talk about from what I do. So to support Black Dad Unfiltered, which is, content creation, we created a clothing line, right? So, if you go to the clothing line, what do I do? Do I buy all these hoodies in size large, extra large, small, medium, different colors, and then try to sell them? I don't have the money for that. Or do I create a partnership with a custom apparel company and I take orders? This is what we call pre-sales, and then I have the hoodies made. All right, that's just an example of how you can start this as long as you're creative. As I used to say, because I'm from Brooklyn, that hustler's mentality, right? In a good way, you figure it out. You don't need a lot of money, but I will say you will need money to sustain your business. You have to quit your job first. This is actually, so one of the things that I see a lot of people say is you got to fully commit. You got to be smart about this. You don't quit your job if there's no plan, if there's no game plan. Matter of fact, if I'm giving you some advice right now, you start thinking about quitting your job when your business starts making more money than your job for you. So if your job is paying you 40,000 and you see your business is doing 25,000, but if you're able to give full time of your effort and energy, you can start making 60, that may be a good moment. But we don't quit until we have evidence, right? You don't have to. I encourage you to keep your job, start side hustles, test the market, and then make the decision. You must have a perfect business plan. There is no such thing as a perfect business plan. Matter of fact, a study just showed there's only been one plan that's been perfect, and it was written by ChatGPT. right? That if you looked at it, you're like, wow, this is actually a perfect plan. But what you do need is clarity. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this. Clarity, you need some roadmap. So a one-page plan with clear goals is often enough to begin. Starting is the biggest part, right? As we say, good enough is good enough. We'll figure it out on the way. Success happens overnight. This is the one that's scary because a lot of people that think about going into business ownership, entrepreneurship, believe if they build it, they will come. If I start it, it's going to be a hit. You know, this term that we hear now, viral, it's probably the worst thing that you can hear because everyone thinks they can go viral, you know, whatever they're doing. No, it takes a process. Oftentimes, real success takes years of perfecting your craft, of effort, of persistence until you finally position yourself, you know, to a point where you can be successful. And to everyone else watching, it's going to be like, wow, they were successful overnight. And that's actually not the case, right? So, really, and then you have to do it alone. Folks, if you're taking notes, support networks, and then towards the end, I'm going to give you a few resources for this. Support networks are huge for entrepreneurship. If you're taking notes, please write this down. We do not grow in isolation, we grow in community. Having a network, being plugged in, is important to becoming a good entrepreneur, right? You cannot do this on your own. You actually need to be part of something bigger, right? And then also building a team and learning how to delegate is essential for growth. So those are some common myths and the reality. So just want to take a quick poll question here. Uh Tracy, if you can see the hands, this is where the good emojis are going to help me. You must have a business
Okay.
degree to start a business. True or false? If anyone wants to type it in the chat, I'm going to ask Tracy if you can see the chat, give me an idea of which way we're leaning.
Okay.
But I want an interaction. I want to make sure we're plugged in, right?
Yes.
So, folks, true or false? You must have a business degree to start a business. There's about
Okay. So Wexel, the name on here is Buck R. Javier, Jorge, Bernard. They all said false.
perfect. That thank you. You got it, right? That's false. But now my question is, then what do you need, right? So, thinking still about the mindset, these are some of the things you need to develop to become a good entrepreneur. Not necessarily to start the business, but to actually be in a position to build a business and grow it. Communication, adaptability, leadership, emotional intelligence, problem solving. Let's go back up to communication. It's just not oral. You need to be clear and persuasive in your communication. So that's actually writing. And it wasn't until I got into this world, and I've been in entrepreneurship for 25 years, that I realized how important writing was. When I was growing up and grammar and syntax, and it didn't make sense to me. I barely spoke English. But once I got into this world, I started realizing writing is a major form of communication in the United States, right? But being clear with my communication, when I go to pitch my idea, some of you may have an idea now that you want to pitch. Can you pitch it in a way that somebody understands? Right? When you're delegating to your team or managing them, are you clear on what you're saying to them? And then building relationships, right? I'm going to go to the two that I think are almost more crucial. So, communication, emotional intelligence, problem solving to me are the biggest ones. Soft skills, emotional intelligence. And again, I can only speak from my position. I embody a black man, so I can speak from the position of a person of color that represents the BIPOC. My community is not big on therapy, are not big on talking. Folks, this is the biggest detriment to an entrepreneur. Emotional intelligence is critical to becoming a successful entrepreneur because it is a stressful environment. How will you manage stress, right? How do you understand others' perspectives? Part of being an entrepreneur and getting into business is practicing empathy and sympathy. Empathy, sympathy means you can understand what someone's going through. Empathy means you can live through their experience. And you can't do that if you don't really understand the different degrees of emotions, how they impact you, why they impact you. And you start seeing the more entrepreneurs that can kind of look at people and understand humanity in them, they tend to do well in terms of getting allies and building supporters. And then they maintain strong relationships. Um, Side note, right? So I used to teach at LaGuardia, and in organizational behavior, I used to do this exercise called locus of control. This is an emotional intelligence barometer, right? Locus of control means how much are you blaming your external environment versus how much is internal. Easiest example, I take a test, I got a 50 on it, right? Now I ask you all, and you pick between these two choices. If I got a 50 on it, was the test too hard or did I not study enough? Just if there's five of us, just put in a chat. Tell me, and only pick one. Was the test too hard or did I not study enough? I just want to see what you all are saying.
Okay. Let me look and see. Javier said didn't study enough.
Right? So I'll use Javier. And folks, don't be afraid to chime in. So using that, that's what we call a internal locus of control. That means I'm looking at myself and I have full control over my environment. If you were to say the test was too hard, and it could be, right? It's a scale, it's a spectrum. You're really blaming the external environment. As an entrepreneur, you have to have a high level of internal locus of control. It's, you know what? There's a pandemic, there's this, there's that, there's racial injustice, there's criminal, whatever the case may be, right? You have to almost now say, despite this, what can I do? And then problem solving. This is the most biggest, and which is why I love Instagram, right? Because these are what we call the hacks. You have to tackle obstacles creatively and effectively, right? So you just have to be able to look at stuff differently, which is why you don't need a business degree, right? Like someone's using this, can I do it differently? Can I turn a plastic bottle into a plant? Whatever. This is one. These three to me are the most critical. And again, if you're taking pictures of the slides, by all means, adaptability, we're going to dive a little bit more into that, and leadership. You got to be clear with where you want to go with this. Now, from a technical perspective, these are things where, again, you don't need a business degree, but you do need these skills. Financial literacy. So again, I know you're in this course. I encourage you all to take financial literacy courses, right? Right. So if you can manage your personal finances and understand what that looks like, it helps you with business finances. But in business, you have to understand budgeting. You have to understand what we call financial statements, right? You have to understand how cash is moving in your business because these are critical to making business decisions. Most of the businesses that I work with that struggle are the ones that do not have business financial literacy. The ones that tend to become successful are the ones that learn it and now can make decisions based off of what they see, not their feelings. Digital marketing, we know we can't avoid this now. This is the new age we're in. So, an entrepreneur needs to understand and accept that digital marketing is a critical part of business scaling. Right. So, again, if you can take any Google courses in digital marketing, I encourage all of that stuff because this is the way of the world now. Data. Right. Again, these are certifications you can go after that can really help you. Data analysis. 40% of businesses, what is it? Businesses that use data outperform other businesses by 40%. What does that mean? You're not using your gut emotions. It's not that I feel this. It's what does the data say? This data says, as much as I love the blue t-shirt, the green one is actually selling more. I need to sell more of the green one. Any skills in project management, which is, understanding how to allocate resources, and then Excel. So I will tell you, again, just framework. If you can learn Excel, that's huge. If you can learn project management, if you can learn digital marketing and actually learn it, and if you can actually learn your personal financial literacy, those are skills that you need to really start going into business for yourself. So let's do another poll question. Right. And again, this is just to to gauge us and see where we are. Which age group do you think most entrepreneurs start in? A, under 20, B, 20 to 30, C, 30 to 40, D, 40 to 50, or over 50 years old? Again, I think there's 5 or 6 of us on this call. By all means, put A, B, C, D, or E, and someone will help me to say which one was the highest selected by the group. So I see we got one answer. I'm waiting for a few more
Yeah,
people.
that
We
was
got,
me.
okay, great. Everyone chime in. Three more answers.
Wexel
Four.
said C.
Uh-huh.
The name under Buck said B.
Uh-huh.
Javier said C.
Uh-huh. All
And so
right.
far, that's it. Yep.
All right. Well, drum roll. The average successful startup founder, according to Harvard, is 45 years old.
See, I was right. Yay!
So let's talk about why that is. It's to get into entrepreneurship, and we're going to talk about this. You have to understand why you're doing it. You have to be committed to it. You have to be at a point where, remember, I mentioned emotional intelligence. So typically, those, when you get to a little bit older, you're a little bit more seasoned as a human being, which probably allows you to be more adaptable, more flexible, more empathetic, very clear about who you are, what you want, and things of that nature. However, while we're on this call, I want to emphasize it's never too late. That's the beauty about entrepreneurship. It's never too late. And that's the average age for someone who's successful. So I encourage you all who are thinking about this to really, really commit to this session right now and see what works for you. Okay. So we're going to transition now to the 5 stages of company development. Before I do that, I just want to dial in, plug in, do a temperature check. How are we feeling? Do we have any questions? If you have questions, by all means, put it into the chat. If you want to ask me so everyone can hear it, might benefit the group. If not, I'll continue. Yeah, but this is informal. By all means, stop me whenever you want. I'm going to give you the 5 stages of a company just so you can have an idea of what this looks like. So, one thing I want to make, demystify, a company has a life, very similar to us people. It has a beginning and it actually has an end, right? And so through that cycle, it's the startup, right, which is the early years of a human being, right? This is what we call the childhood years. This is where you have a vision and you're developing your business idea. Then we go to validation, which is your teenage years. And, teenagers, you're really looking to establish your own independence, find your own voice, right? And then expansion. If I were to translate it to a personal life, this is when we're going to college, where we're seeing more of the world and we're developing as young adults, right? Looking for new opportunities, changing jobs, figuring out what works. Um, and then you have maximized profitability. These are the adult years, right? This is when I'm trying to, I'm making sound decisions. And then exit, senior years, retirement. So let's just see what this looks like written out so that you can see it if you want to take pictures of the screen, right? So, as I mentioned before, startup. This is the childhood years. During this stage, you develop a plan and you develop a business idea and you start your business. For the purpose, actually, let me go back. For the purpose of this presentation, even though I'm showing you this entire cycle, I'm pretty much only going to stay here, right? I'm really going to stay in the startup and validation phase. But let's go here, validation. This is the teen years of a business, right? Establishing where you fit in, you develop the company's own unique identity, you carve out a distinct place in the eyes of your customers. The reason why I'm staying here, many companies never make it beyond this teenage phase of development because it's the hardest. This is where now you're really in competition. You're really trying to figure out what your business is going to be in the real world, and you're trying to get customers to accept who you are, right? So you'll need to develop a unique value proposition. What value do you bring to your customer that they want to trust you? In this phase, you're building a lot of trust. The hardest thing in business is customer acquisition. right? Because nobody's loyal anymore. They're not faithful. So you always are in a position where you have to prove yourself to the person to convince them to buy again from you until the point where they won't buy from anyone else. So, we'll stay here. But for the sake of your education, expansion, you have a good business. Remember, I told you I work with businesses that are in the growth phase. So my businesses are typically at the end, somewhere in here, and we're now getting ready, somewhere in here, sorry, and we're now getting ready to expand. Okay. So the college years, rapid growth and development. Your business, you expand your business by pursuing new customers, new sales, and you make significant investment into your company's future. At this moment is where we start talking about taking loans out for the business, the stuff that's scary, getting investors, other owners into the business. During this phase, you focus on strictly making more and more sales, and you look to pursue new opportunities for your business. When we say new opportunities, oh, it's a good example. Uh, I don't know if you know McDonald's. McDonald's now has a partnership with Krispy Kreme. So McDonald's used to be a milkshake company, then started selling burgers, right? And then started selling breakfast. These When it started selling breakfast, even though it's still food, it's a new opportunity because selling breakfast has its own requirements. Now they are looking to sell donuts, partnering with Krispy Kreme. So you're always looking to expand. And then once you're really good, again, now it's a refinement, become perfect. So I would say Amazon is in this phase still, even though Amazon's $1 trillion company. They're always doing something new. Like Amazon now is trying to buy TikTok. Amazon is not a social media company, but they're looking to buy TikTok. McDonald's is always looking to just do whatever they do and make it better and better and better, and then exit. Right? This is retirement, moving on. If I'm gonna leave you with a bit of advice from this slide, when you start your business, you have to think about how you want to exit it. This is why personal financial literacy is so important. I used to be in wealth management as well. One of the things that I know when people start working, they don't. It's difficult. They don't start planning for when they're 60, when they're 20. They start planning for when they're 60, when they're 60. By then, it's too late, unless you've already been wealthy. So when you start, you have to think about what is 30 going to look like, what's 40 going to look like, and at what age am I going to retire? How much money am I going to need when I retire? And now it almost helps shape the decisions you make from when you start. So that's a brief overview of the stages of business growth. Again, we're going to stay in the startup validation phase, but I just want to give you some context. So let's go into the mindset and readiness of an entrepreneur. I just want to make sure I'm good on time with you all. All right. So the entrepreneur mindset. And I think you all know this. You got to be resilient. But the thing is, you got to handle setbacks with grit. This goes back to that emotional intelligence and what we call how do you manage the stress and the internal locus of control. Like you have to be, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It's not, I'm going to get into this and it's going to be all roses. It's once I get into this, the grind now has really started. And how am I going to handle when something inevitably will go wrong? So, case in point, I told you I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. When the pandemic happened and restaurants couldn't have people come in anymore because the city stopped it, physical fitness gyms couldn't have people going. Like, how do you deal with this? So you got to become creative, right? So if you had a physical gym and people couldn't come in, then you start doing online fitness classes, right? And a lot of people started adapting different, what we call modalities, different ways of doing business. This is the creativity and adaptability part. And I will say this, you gotta love learning. Um, I used to, again, I grew up in Brooklyn, so a good amount of my friends, we grew up in Flatbush, and they weren't big on school. And I told them, you're not gonna run from this. If you want to start making money, you're gonna have to learn. It goes hand in hand, right? If you want to make money that's sustainable, or you want to make money that's a little bit lower risk, and especially if you want to stay in the legal world. So I had a good friend of mine who decided to become a firefighter. Great. But I don't know if you know, in firefighters, to start getting promoted to certain ranks and start making some serious money, he had to start going to school and taking certain classes. Then he started, doing EMT. So he really had to invest. I don't care what type of learning, it always applies. And then all of a sudden, he started buying property. So he started watching videos, reading books on building properties and flipping, and again, now he's doing quite well for himself. I had another friend who had a learning challenge, became a teacher at some point. He just went back to school, found out how he could learn best, became a teacher. But because of the experience of learning, then he got into crypto. I think he's worth about $500,000 now. Doesn't work anymore. You got to learn. I'm not telling you got to do conventional, but an entrepreneur is always learning something new. Assess your readiness. Are you ready for this world? All right, you got to evaluate your time. You got to take a look at your financial position. Even though you don't need a lot of money to start, you still got to understand business needs money to sustain itself. And you got to look at your skills. And we talked about the skills. I gave you 10 skills earlier, right? We'll talk about that. And then you got to understand why. At some point, going back to the story of my father, his why was me and my sister. Going back to me, my why are my three children and their future children. So I'm not just trying to put my kids through college. I'm trying to make sure anyone that comes with my last name after me, my last name will be as prominent as the Rockefellers. I'm trying to build an empire. And for that, I will endure as much as I have to. Right. And again, this is the Father Academy. You're not here if you don't have an extreme commitment to being a good father and doing what you can for your family. And you got to be able to look bigger picture. Again, if you're taking notes, and I should have had it here, here's a term that most successful wealthy people have. It's a trait, but here's the term for it. It's called delayed gratification. What does that mean? That means you're willing to delay your gratification long term because you believe there is a long term. The best story of this is, again, coming out of high school with my friends. Again, we're all first generation Haitian. Uh, my friends were extremely. Went to work security. I went to college. They went to go work jobs, so they were making about $800 a week. And again, this is 20 years ago, so that was a lot of money. For some, I don't know if that's any is that money now. And they would look at me. You're going to school. We're already making this money. Back then, we used to buy Moschino and Versace and Polo. And I was in school. I was in school upstate. I was playing football. I had a football scholarship. And for 4 years, my friends are making money and I'm going to school. When I graduated and I got my first check, I'll never forget this. I looked at my friend's check, which is what he went home with. I looked at my check and I said, what you go home with is what they take out of my taxes. Our checks were significantly different in size. And then it was my commitment to investing in myself, realizing that I had a bigger payday. And now, when you look at me and my friends' trajectory, not all of them, because some of them eventually started doing the learning, and you start seeing our potential is different now. And again, that ties back into having a long term vision. I'm really working on the mindset here. Let's break this down a little bit more when we talk about assess your readiness. Evaluate your time commitment. Can you dedicate consistent time to your business? Doesn't mean you got to do 80 hours a week, but whatever you give, can you do it consistently? Week in, week out. If you're going to give 10 hours, can I do this consistently? The best example of this is in the content creators. You'll have someone post content every day, 14 days straight, and they fall off the face of the earth. Well, Instagram has an algorithm for this. So if you're not consistent, it knocks you out. In business, consistency is important. In any part of your life, actually, consistency. Discipline and consistency go hand in hand as character traits that you need to be successful, period, in life. But can you dedicate consistent time to your business? This is a question you have to ask yourself to see if you're ready. I can't say, well, I can do 2 hours today and then next week I can give 3 hours. Your financial position. Do you have savings or financial plan to support your startup? You don't need it to start, but you're going to need some money to sustain and support it. And we're going to talk about that. Skills assessment. Remember, do you possess the necessary skills? I gave you 5 technical, I gave you 5 soft skills. I gave you 10 skills in all. If you were to check them off and you had 2, are you willing to learn some of the other ones? Because if you're not willing to learn for the sake of the business really doesn't have much life to it. And then your support system. We talked about this. You do not grow in isolation. Do you have mentors? And we'll talk about ways to get access to mentors, possibly family members who can support you in terms of understanding business or even support it financially or just emotionally. Or partners who can support you. Can I have a business partner who can complement my skills? Right. So assessing your readiness isn't it just about passion for the business? It's about preparation, right? So you always want to start with your time. Do you have enough time? You want to review your finances. You don't need to be rich, but you need to be realistic. Then you want to check your skill set and be honest with yourself. Are you ready to lead, market, and manage? Right? And then assess your personal risk tolerance and your resilience. How much risk are you willing to take? Entrepreneurship is really a journey of ups and downs. So when you get into business entrepreneurship, business starter 101, most people don't talk about this, but this is what I do for a living. This is where I see people don't really take this time. But if your answers are I'm ready, not just from a passion perspective, but realistically and pragmatically, well, let's get into identifying a business idea then, right? And so I'm gonna start with just asking you another poll question, right? And again, if there's 3, 4, 5, 6 of you, or anyone, I see we have 11 people here, so everyone I want to chime in. So 10, I should get 10 responses. What's the first thing you need to start a business? Is it a great idea? B, a business plan? C, funding, which means access to money to sustain it? D, a website so people can find you? Or E, customers? So go type in A. So, and I want to wait till I have all 10 of you. So far, 2 people, 3 people responded. I got 7 more people. Even if you're part of the staff, I want everyone to respond. All right, I'm waiting for 5 more people. All right. So with the 5 answers I got, you know, Tracy, I'm sorry to pick on you. If you help me out here, right? Give me an idea. Like, what's the most popular answer you see?
Um, what, as far as like a great idea?
No, like between what's the first thing you need to start a business? A, B,
Oh,
C, D, or
hey, a
E.
great idea. Yeah.
All right, great. I love that.
Hmm.
The answer is E,
Oh, wow.
right? Many successful startups begin with customers first and build everything else. So, right? So this is where the misnomer is. How do you know if it's a great idea? Just because it's a great idea to you doesn't mean someone else is willing to pay for it. Right? I may think it's a great idea to bring back, uh, mm, I don't know if any of you know the term, a Walkman, a cassette player, V
Cassette players is
videotapes.
it.
You said, what'd you say, buddy?
I said cassette players is fake it. I ain't gonna lie. DVD play the little handheld DVD players. You feel me? The portable
I'm
DVD
with you.
players. I
I'm
ain't gonna
with you
lie. I
right
used
there.
to have one of those. And the iPods. You feel me? I ain't gonna lie. Just the other day, I was on my way to work because I work in the city. And
Yeah.
I ain't gonna lie. It's funny you said that and brought that up. It's funny because I dead saw somebody who was selling cassette. I'm gonna try. I saw somebody who was selling a cassette player,
Mm-hmm.
a old school CD player,
Yeah.
the DVD player that I was talking about, the portable one. The
Yeah. Yeah.
he had the iPod Nano, the regular first iPod. He had the iPod 4. I'm looking at it, I'm like, yo, they just brought me back to memory lane right here. Like this is
Man, listen.
crazy.
So let's stay there. So this is a great example, right? Someone's selling it, right? And you may get 1 or 2 customers that like it, but is it enough to sustain a business? This is why we always start with customers. Customers will tell you if your idea makes sense or not, and they will tell you, is this because remember, You have to convert this into someone willing to pay for it. So we always look at customers, what do they need? Tracy, you have your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Sure.
So, I mean, and just help me to understand. So if if customers are first, right, in order
Uh-huh.
for you to start a business,
Mm-hmm.
then how do you know, what
Uh,
the idea is? So for an example, right,
mm-hmm.
if someone may think about, oh, I want to get a food truck, or let's say someone wants to work in healthcare, let's say open up a home care business,
Sure.
but you don't have any customers yet. So like, how do you know if it would work for you?
Perfect. So when we say customers, great question. Thank you for chiming in. You really start saying identifying problems. Like if I was to look and say, I want to work with these people, or this is possible, 'cause you start looking at how you solve problems, and how you solve problems is always connected to someone. So for example, as long as you're looking at the world, right, you're always going to see problems. And from there, you start looking at who's the customer and you become more specific. So when I was thinking about this, I said, okay, we all come into LaGuardia. I come into the C building in LaGuardia, and we all know this whole show your ID thing doesn't make sense, right? Because you got 60 people walking at the same time, and you got a security guard that's just saying, okay, 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 right? So now I'm looking to solve problems for the world, right? So this is why we start saying customer centric. I say, if I was to solve this problem for LaGuardia, LaGuardia becomes a customer. What does LaGuardia care about? Right? So we're always looking for problems first, then we're attaching that problem to a customer, and then we come out with the idea for a solution. I know it's a backwards way, so it's not a matter of saying I have someone who's going to pay, but we're looking for what is an issue that I can solve for a person or a business. That's why we start with customer first. And if you make everything customer centric, everything else flows from there. Where most people go wrong, they think about their idea and they fall in love with their idea, and then they look to find someone to purchase their idea. This is where you have a problem. So we have to get into the process of identifying opportunities, is what I call it. Again, if I looked at LaGuardia, I'd be like, why not just put it like the MTA, put in a little kiosk, and people can use their phone to just swipe in. That way, the college, does security would just be there to any technical issues. College will always know who's in there. They will know what's the biggest time of day someone's coming in, and from now we get data, and it's easier for students coming in, it's easier for the security guards. These are all everything you see in the world is someone solving a problem. If you go to the gyms started looking at their members and saying, oh, wow, members are holding Walkmans in their place. So guess what happens? Let's take a gym. So if you own a gym, you're buying equipment, right? If I'm selling equipment to a gym, I have competition. I have to say, how do I convince this gym owner to buy my equipment versus someone else's equipment? This is real world. Certain manufacturers of the equipment started, this is back in the day, started putting in cable cords for your iPhone. So now when you're in the gym, you can just plug your phone into a fitness equipment, and all of a sudden it's playing through the actual equipment. It's charging the equipment. This is where people started saying, oh, looking at the customer, right? And we call it customer centric, and seeing what can help them, we come up with ideas and possible solutions. So you want to follow trends and passions. You want to understand the type of business you're going to have. I mean, I'm going to define this next slide: service based, product based, tech enabled. I told you I have Jubal Talents. That's what we call tech enabled, and I'll define it in a few minutes. Am I online, or do I have a physical retail location, what we call brick and mortar? And then with the idea, you want to validate your idea. You want to check it up against competitors. You want to do surveys. You want to realize, okay, I have a great concept because I looked at the world. I looked at the world and said, hey, I see this as a problem that this group of people or this group of businesses share. I think I can come up with a solution. Now the idea comes in. I can deliver it this way. Now it's a type of business. But now let me make sure that people may like it. Before I went to Jubal Talents, I went to a Dark Child, who's a famous music producer, because my business partner is a producer. and they loved the idea. I said, okay, I see that. And I went to one of my friends, she just started a company with Fantasia, who won the American Idol. I told her, I have this idea. What do you think? Do you think the music industry would want this? I started making sure before I started investing money. And then they all asked me the same thing. Is anyone else doing it? How is this better than that? So this is where we get into the competitor analysis. So this is, part of the business idea world. Identify opportunities. How would we deliver it? We got to substantiate our idea. Does it actually make sense? Right? Another good example. Again, I'm old enough. I started with Nintendo, right? Nintendo's 8-bit, Super Mario Brothers. Funny enough, 5 years ago, Nintendo came back around again. Why? I'm not good at PlayStation. I don't have the dexterity. I'm old school. I like Super Mario Brothers. And so they're like, there's a whole population now that's older that knows us, that wants to play video games, but wants to play the games they grew up with. So they re-released a different version of the Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and for like a good year or two, it was coming off the shelves for Christmas. Everyone's buying it. Wives buying it for their husbands, and so forth and so forth. Husbands buying it for wives, brothers, uncles. So this gives you an idea of understanding and looking at the customer and seeing where they are in life. This is why, so I'm getting close to 50. I grew up with comic books. This is why you see so many X-Men and Spider-Man movies, because right now, my age group, which goes to the movies, this is what we would love to see. Business is beautiful. So let's go into defining the types of business, because I know we have, short amount of time left and I want to get through this. Service based, just giving you the definitions, values delivered through skills and expertise, right? So you don't have something tangible, something physical. You're selling your abilities and what you're really good at. Product based, now we're talking about something physical or digital. Remember, I told you I also own Black Dad Unfiltered. This is a digital platform. So eventually we're going to be selling movies, right? This is product based. And then tech enabled. I told you Jubal Talents. This is where you use technology to deliver your value or improve processes. These are the apps, the mobile apps. I have blackdadclothing.com. This is my e-commerce store. These are tech enabled. So this is giving you a definition. Then you have online, and some of the benefits of online: low overhead. Doesn't cost you much to start an online business, and you can reach the entire world. Now, it is open 24/7, which means you can make money while you're sleeping, but you have to create a back office and infrastructure that supports something that never stops. And you got to be good at digital marketing, right? It requires it, because you're now fighting on a global scale for people to know who you are. And then brick and mortar is physical. You have a retail location. This is face to face. You sell something to someone, and you're really focused on local traffic. This is why, where you set up your local business is so important. If you set up and again, if you set up a daycare in a senior citizen community, it doesn't make sense. Senior citizens don't have young children, right? So these are things to think about, and it costs more money. And this is just giving you some of the definitions. Let's get into business planning. All right. So again, you have your idea. We started with identifying an opportunity through looking at people and looking at customers, really looking at people. Uh, we now feel like, based on our feedback, we have something. Let's talk about why it's important to start planning. Again, clarity, roadmap for success. If you start looking for loans, all banks are going to require, not all banks, some types of banks will require a plan so that they feel confident that you know what you're doing. In your plan is where you're now going to start looking at what we call your market, the people you can sell to and the people you compete against. And in your plan, you're going to talk about your financials, right? And the plan helps you set SMART goals, right? SMART is an acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound. We're going to get into that in a few seconds, but I just want to give you a chart so that we can see it. The benefits, I'm going to really talk about, provide clear direction. Okay. It outlines your goals, helps secure funding. Banks require it for loans. Investors use it to see if you really understand what you're doing, right? Improves decision making, right? It holds you accountable, so to speak. It helps you avoid distractions. We have a plan, we're going to stick to the plan, and it helps you start seeing challenges and risk in your business. So by having a plan, you're almost trying to see what can possibly go wrong and have a plan for it. And then more importantly, having a plan attracts people, right? Team members understand their role and they understand the bigger picture. So having a plan is another strong communication tool. So let's look at the key elements of a business plan. I'm going to keep it high level here, but it talks about your target market. So you're targeting a specific group of people. Best example, we know Skechers, the sneaker brand. Am I selling Skechers to a 17-year-old kid in New York City? Chances are no. That kid wants nothing to do with it, right? And if the kid's a basketball player, he definitely doesn't want to touch Skechers. However, will Skechers work for a 55-year-old woman who's a nurse who's on her feet 14 times a day? She would love it. This is what we mean really understanding who you're targeting, right? And by that, you have to understand the customer. You want to know what's happening in the industry, where everything is moving, right? I don't know if you're aware, uh, Blockbuster could not see that the future of television was in streaming, or the future of movies was in streaming. So Blockbuster was here before Netflix, but Blockbuster was like, we're gonna keep doing what we do. This is where you're not adapting. You're not seeing that technology is about to take over the world. And then all of a sudden, Netflix just blew it out the water and Blockbuster had to file bankruptcy. You know, Customer needs. This is, folks, if you're ever looking at business, understanding your customer is so important, right? I must stay with the cons. I'm not even going to focus on the benefit. If you don't know your customer, chances are you're going to have product rejection. So even if you have a good idea and you think you have a good idea, if it's not customer first, you may not have enough demand and people are going to reject it in masses. Same thing. If you don't know your target market, you're going to go to the wrong person, waste a lot of money. Competitor analysis, right? Oh, I'm going to start, this high-end barbershop. There's 1,000 barbershops. Right? What's going to make you different? And then market size and growth. You all should have a chance to have read this, but I just want to give you the key elements. Let's talk about setting SMART goals. I'm just going to go through the examples, right? Specific, define, clear, and focused goals. Let's use the example. Launch an online store to sell eco-friendly candles. Very specific. Measurable. This term metrics is big in business. Gain 100 email subscribers within the first month. Let's break this down. A month has 4 weeks. I'm trying to get 25 email subscribers a week. This is different because this is a result, right? I can't control who subscribes, but the goal is to get 25 people to subscribe, and I'm gonna know if I'm doing it right, if the external environment is responding to me. Achievable. Set realistic and attainable objectives, right? This is internal. Complete website and product photography in 30 days. Relevant. Aligns with your business purpose and vision, right? Focus on digital marketing because your audience is online, right? Both my businesses, my audience is online. So everything I do is really focused on the user interface. How well does the app work? How good is our content? And then time bound, setting specific deadlines. This is stuff that you'll learn that is constantly reiterated. Now, here's an area that I know business owners tend to struggle with. Legal structure. So I'm
Yep.
going to go through this. So just to give you an idea, choosing the right type of business structure for the government, find, first learn the pros and cons of each type of business structure and decide what's right for you. See if the name for your business is available, then file your business with the state or your local body, right? I'm not going to focus on licenses and insurances. I'm going to go into the legal structures. Sole proprietor, easiest thing to set up. You're doing business under your name, under your tax ID. You can even DBA, but let's just say it's under your tax ID. One of the benefits is very easy. One of the consequences, if your business does something wrong, everything you own is exposed. If you own a house, it's exposed. If you own a car, someone sues you, everything is fair game. But it has its benefits, right? So it depends where you are. If you're doing like a side hustle, if you're doing photography for someone, it may not require you to go build out a whole fancy business, right? Because, so we're really looking at low risk businesses. Partnership, once it starts becoming two people, right? Then now we start looking at the partnership. You all are sharing the liability and potential conflicts. So if you go into a partnership with someone, one of the cons is if your partner does something wrong, you're still exposed, by the way. So if me and Tracy go into business together and we're doing business as a partnership, which means under our own social security numbers or whatever the case may be, and I do something wrong, I can affect Tracy's entire life, right? But again, this is depending on the type of business, it can work. I'm just giving you very simplistic versions. One of the popular ones is LLC, which is called limited liability. It's flexible. Um, this is where now you're not fully exposed. It's easy to set up. It's about 1,000, depending on where you are. It's about $1,000 to set up actually. The others are basically almost free. Um, but it does offer you protection. And the best time to do it is when you're growing a small business and you start hiring people. Once you start hiring people and you start realizing you have something to lose, you want to start looking at the LLC or the S corp. S corp, again, this is where you're a profitable small business, you're making significant money, you're active in the business. This allows you to, again, separate you from the business. You are literally, the business has its own social security number or what we call a tax identification number. It's its own person based on the government, and it allows you a lot of flexibility in terms of raising capital or getting investors. And then this is when you start getting into the bigger players, the McDonald's, the Walmarts. This is where you're really looking to, scale your business. Amazon, eBay, these are C corps. And then if you're doing a nonprofit, understand one of the cons is strict rules. You don't, nonprofits not designed for you to become rich. They're really designed for you to do a social good, right? C corp, when we really start blowing up and we think we can get into $500 million, $250 million of money. But these two are the ones, if you're ever thinking about it, I would say use one of the free resources the city provides and stay in this area. Now, you know the type of business you want. Let's say it's an LLC and you want to look for a name. This is the link you can go to see if your name is available. And if you go to this link, it's going to look something like this, right? So you just put in the name you want, type in entity status. You can use the word begins with. You can change it to contains. Check all these. Sorry, let me go on this screen. You put in your name. You change this to it contains with or begins with, whatever you want. There's options. Check all four of these. You click search database, and it will tell you if someone else owns the name to your company. This is for the state of New York, in the state of New York. And if they don't, by all means, now you begin to file the paperwork to claim the name and actually start filing the paperwork. As we said in this last step, file the paperwork to start your company. I always recommend seek tax advice. Oh, that's another thing with this. All these have different tax implications. Once you become a successful business owner, taxes mean everything to you. So let's go into understanding your market. Again, this is high level. We talked about this already. Target an audience. You really want to look for commonalities in your customer, right? Because we're in a digital age, you really want to group them to say, okay, this group of people, uh, women in healthcare, 50 to 60 years old, looking to retire, concerned about, leaving something behind for their children. Once I can group them together, I know how to sell. We know, let's say use Nike. We know Nike is looking for the next person after LeBron because their customers are young children, typically 18 to 5, right? Especially for their basketball sneaker, right? And so they're looking, they know they're young boys, they're athletic. Typically, their mother's going to buy their sneaker. And so they start creating a profile for the target audience. Then they do a competitor analysis. Okay, we know who we're going to sell to, we know what they want. How do we stack up? And then what sets us apart? So you really want to understand, who am I selling to? What are my strengths and weaknesses, threats, opportunities? Like, how do I stack up in competition? Like, we both are, two, three of us are trying to sell to the same type of person. Adidas, Nike, Reebok, all of them are trying to sell to, urban youth for sneakers. What's going to set us apart from any of these? Even Under Armour jumped into the game. Under Armour is the most recent one, right? And funny enough, Under Armour focuses on women when the other three brands focus on men. So a SWOT analysis really starts staying into my strengths, my weaknesses. These are internal. So if we look at this, you're looking internally. What are you good at? What are you weak at? And how can I get better here? External, that means out of your control. What are opportunities for us to grow? Under Armour did this beautifully, because when Under Armour first came out, they were a joke. Now they're a serious player in the game. And then what are the threats to our brand? So for Nike, they started realizing Under Armour is a threat, right? Adidas started realizing Under Armour is a threat. So what can Adidas do? What are opportunities? What does our sneaker do really well, right? And things of that nature. So let's move on. Hopefully you took a picture of this, but you see some of the questions. So this is very important when you're starting a business. Now we're going to go here. I'm going to spend some time here. Let me just take a look at my time check. It looks like I'm up against the clock. So part of the things with business is finances and funding. So I'm just going to go here real quick. I want to talk about your credit score. Credit scores is the one thing people don't talk about when they're starting a business. Your credit score means the world in business. It dictates your financial reliability. So if you're not thinking about your credit score now, you want to become an entrepreneur, I suggest you do. It affects your ability to get a loan. It determines interest rates. If you do take loans, it impacts your vendors, your suppliers, partnerships. It's essential for early stage entrepreneurs. This is what your credit score means. Excellent. 750 to 850. Businesses, banks look at you as low risk. That you're trustworthy. 650 to 749. Your minimum risk score is under 650. Now they see you as a potential risk and they're less likely to loan to you. Let's go to branding and marketing. This is areas that I said I wouldn't stay too long on. So I'm going to just talk more about this. Understanding social media and what each platform means when it comes to your marketing. Each platform has a purpose. Facebook can be used for customer service. All the platforms can be used for engagement. Building communities, you don't really see building community in Snapchat or YouTube or TikTok or Snapchat or YouTube, right? So this is a more sophisticated. I'm not going to stay here, but I just want you to know, in branding and marketing, you're really going to have to take some time. This is why digital marketing is so important, because each platform, Facebook is one of the few platforms that addresses almost everything you need in business, followed by Twitter. I'm not going to go into growth and scaling because I do want to give time for conversation. So let's talk about resource and support. Remember these websites, sba.gov. This is where you can get mentors, templates, everything to help you start your